I'd like to warmly welcome our first presenter in the Creighton University School of Medicine Distinguished Lecture Series, Dr. Katie Huggett. She's the Robert Lerner Professor of Medical Education in the Robert Lerner College of Medicine at the University of Vermont. She's also the Director of the Teaching Academy there and Assistant Dean for Medical Student Education. So as many of you know, Katie was here for 11 years, and so we definitely warmly welcome you back. And she's on campus today and tomorrow, primarily talking about teaching academies, and that her expertise not only stems from her work as Director of Teaching Academies, but she's also been a past chair of the National Academies Collaborative and also past member of the AIMZ Board of Directors. So Gail did a great job this morning when she talked directly about teaching academies, so I'll keep it brief, but she's nationally and internationally recognized for contributions to a lot of different topics, including academic program quality improvement, curriculum innovation, interprofessional education. But it's really in the areas of faculty development and faculty recognition that kind of underlie a lot of the teaching academies and the success of those teaching academies. And so very timely and kind of central to the theme of her visit here, her presentation on different models of faculty support and success. So please join me in welcoming Katie.
Thank you very much.
I should say one thing, those on Zoom, I'll be monitoring this chat board, so feel free to pose questions there.
Oh, thank you. Well, definitely, I'm happy to take questions as we go along. This is the nice thing about having a smaller group, so we'll just keep it more interactive like that if it works. And I am very happy to be back. This is a lot of fun, and I was saying earlier this morning that I'm not a particularly sentimental person. If you ask my family about that, they'll be more than tell you that I don't have a sentimental bone, is what they would say. I think that's over dramatizing it, but I did, you know, as I was landing at Epley last night, was thinking, I started at Creighton as brand new assistant professor and director of the then was medical education development and evaluation. I gotta think what the title was at the time. September of 2004. So to be here in September of 2024, it was very interesting to think about that and fun to reflect on how much I enjoyed my time and how much I learned at Creighton. It was a big decision to leave, but as you heard, the opportunity to lead a brand new teaching academy with an endowed professorship, it just was something that was getting harder and harder to turn away from, and has been a good chapter. So I'm very happy to be back here and to see faces who are familiar and meeting new individuals and seeing all the new construction. It's absolutely stunning. So including this building, amazing. Happy to talk about academies, although we're going to do a detour, as you just heard, and talk about models for supporting faculty that can be nested within an academy. In fact, the teaching academy that I have the privilege to lead has a mentoring program, and we can talk about that at the end if anyone's interested to learn about that. And these are three models that are often overlapping, and you can even have skills related to these models and use them sort of in your current role. But I want to talk about what we know to be the differences and the strengths and goals for these, and share some of the literature to provide an introduction, and then just to get you thinking about what you have, and is it something you would want to expand upon if you were interested in offering a new model or changing sort of what might be out there. So really just to plant some seeds for you today. Let's see. Maybe I can advance with this one, or how about this way?
It should be.
There's a list.
Make sure it's
This building is possessed.
There we go.
Okay. Reset. All right. So no conflicts of interest to disclose. Let's try. Oh, now it works. So some session objectives, which I've really highlighted for you already in terms of talking about the descriptions and the goals. So why talk about this topic? Some of these aren't any surprise. We know that the relationships that faculty build and their feeling of being supported and especially mentorship contribute to faculty success and career satisfaction. I have a quote here from a very recent paper that I direct you to. It's so important in understanding that mentoring is crucial, and especially for our faculty who are underrepresented in the health professions or from or minoritized groups. So essential to have mentoring, and especially if they're unsupportive environments, as were described in this study. This number keeps going up and up. I'm sorry I don't have it for all health professions faculty, but we know depending on sort of which areas of expertise that in a medical school, anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 to replace a medical school faculty person. So if you don't think of the issues around faculty success and belonging, you can look at it through a financial lens, so that's a driver. And then I have personal interest in this topic, so my whole career has been related to faculty development, so it's something I'm personally interested in. And then our academy, as I've said, supports faculty in many ways, including a formal mentor program. I was fortunate, fortunate to join a colleague from the University of Vermont. We participated in, completed the Entering Mentor Training Program. So we went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for a 3-day training. This is something that's now offered in person or virtually. It was designed to sort of as a train-the-trainer model to provide training to mentors predominantly in basic science fields and in laboratory settings, and they've expanded on the curriculum a bit. So we completed that like the year before the pandemic and have then offered that training to our faculty at the University of Vermont. And not just to basic science faculty, we've introduced it in some departments have asked for a version of it. So I really appreciated having that training, and in fact we just reworked it and offered it in March. One of my colleagues had for a T32 requirement needed to provide training fast, so we retooled it. So having had that experience and then leading that training, have really personally found that helpful for our colleagues. And then more recently, last winter, in fact, I completed a program through the Spiro, I know it looks like Spiro, but they pronounce it Spiro Coaching Institute for Academic Health Centers. And this was a 30-hour training program, core skills for coaching, for especially within academic medical centers. And I found that fascinating. I do a lot of what I consider coaching in my own work, and we'll talk about the definition of that. So I was selfishly interested in developing my own toolkit to just be a better director of my teaching academy, and but then also really recognizing the benefits of coaching and that particular model. So, and even since that time, the IAMSE organization, I know some of you in the room are connected to that already, that's the International Association of Medical Science Educators, increasingly across the health professions, not just medical science. They have started the IAM Reach program, which is a mentor training program as well. So I'd encourage you to look at that if you're interested. And I think it's mostly delivered virtually, maybe some in person at their meetings, annual meetings. So it'd be a great program. Okay, so we're going to start with 2 cases. At this point, you're just going to be reading these, taking it in. We'll talk about them later, but I want you to keep these cases in mind as we talk about the models. So this is first the case of Dr. De Leon. I don't know, between the 2 screens, are you able to read? I hate to read what's written. Okay, so I'll give you a minute.
It's true, never heard that.
Yeah.
Fiction, pure fiction, right? You could never imagine this happening. All right, so that's a case to keep in mind. And then we have a second one, Dr. Lee. maybe this one's less common, but you might imagine some variation on this name. All right. So keep these two colleagues in mind. So where will they turn, right? So they may have a formal mentoring program already, so they might say, oh, I'm just gonna go ask my mentor or a trusted friend. They may know about the concept of sponsor, they may have a coach, they may have hired a coach, who knows? So these are words that are used sometimes interchangeably with less precision, so we'll talk about why it's important to suss out the differences between those. But before we go on, we know it's about support, so I'm really curious to know, but I think we'll do this in a think, pair, share way, who has supported you, and to really start thinking about sort of at a high level, maybe what their position was or what it was about the support, and was it short-term, longitudinal, episodic, around a big decision in your career, or maybe ongoing. So let's take a few minutes. If you're on Zoom, you'll have to do this yourself. I'm sorry, we don't have Zoom breakout rooms, but it's still a good reflective exercise. So turn to a neighbor and tell a little bit about the mentor story, or maybe if you've had a coach, if you already have had experience with these different models, that's fine too, but try and answer these questions as you turn to your neighbor. I'll keep an eye on the time.
I had to just really appreciate that. The independence to make decisions. Really? That's funny. That's funny. Later on, being recognized.
I like qualified, I like when
Every time where I know
That's what no, I think that's
Jack knew what he was doing. He didn't have to take
wasn't like you should look powering the
I've been fortunate Okay, I got it. Yeah, sure.
experience.
You know that they started
We need to just right now. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I guess I really.
So there's networks.
Yeah, just let them
We are an exchange.
Yeah, that's right.
Natural science. They're gonna. So when you submitted, here's what I'm doing. And then it started to where's your preliminary?
Right? Yeah. I know.
Yeah, very nice.
Who I am.
A lot of what they do.
Okay, I'm gonna call you back, although it seems like there was a buzz in the room, so lots to say, hoping some of it was positive. So we're not gonna go around and report out officially, but I am curious, if we were doing this as a word cloud with sort of some keywords or phrases, for what worked, if there's a word that encapsulates that or a positive part about one of those support stories, you can share that. You don't have to share the details, but just take sort of a one word or two word description.
Encouragement.
Support.
Talked about accountability.
Oh, accountability. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Networking. Okay.
Not a should, but you will.
Oh, okay.
Push off the push.
Yeah, there you go.
It happened to me.
No hesitation. Okay, yeah, I like it. Those are great. Yeah, any other key phrases? All right, we'll keep those in mind. I'm sure nobody had an experience that wasn't optimal. But on the off chance, are there any words for that word cloud that come to mind about what was missing or what made it suboptimal?
Lack of accountability.
Okay, there you go.
Wait, somebody, sorry for the first
Oh,
one.
mine, yeah.
Say game changer.
Oh, was that the positive though?
That was the
Good,
positive.
okay, yeah, that's like, yeah, no, that's the power of support, right, yeah,
That's great.
that's awesome,
I
yeah,
was
thanks.
told once early in my career that I just didn't need a mentor because they don't work. So that was.
That wasn't me, I hope.
No, it wasn't. It was after you. I was thinking, and it was like, you don't need one, they don't really work. Wow.
Oh, wow. Wow. I mean, the only, I always have to tell people, there is kind of one exception, we talk about the power of mentoring and the literature demonstrates we clearly need, especially early career people need mentoring, but I think we all do. The one exception is the great author and really educational philosopher Parker Palmer has written that at some point, like when you look around and you can't find a mentor, that's a sign that you probably should be a mentor. And I love that. It's not that we stop needing mentors, but it's like at some point, maybe that's a sign like you should step up and be in that role. So, all right, well, thanks. Any other words for the word cloud, positive or negative? Well, one thing that was clear to me was how quickly you embrace the task, so thank you, and the emotion around it. So this was not a static topic. You were definitely telling some stories, I could tell, and with the body language. So that relationship piece absolutely is part of that and just reflected in your conversations in just 4 or 5 minutes.
I think a negative is ego.
Oh, ego.
When a mentee kind of pushes ahead and the mentor is threatened.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to share some. Oh.
Oh, no. And never publish a book. That's what I
All right. Well, keep those stories in mind when we talk about our 2 case studies later on. But first, as promised, I want to share some definitions. One, again, just for clarity, because sometimes these phrases are used interchangeably, but there are differences, and there are certainly differences in the literature. So I want to make sure that you have some definitions that you can use in your own work, or if you're just searching for something, so you have greater precision. So here's a definition from the NIH. It might look familiar to some of you, where mentoring is a learning relationship. So there's a key word, a learning relationship. Generally focused on long term, so this idea that it's not short term episodic, it's meant to be longitudinal, which I think most of us, that's kind of our sense around mentoring, but not always. A more experienced person, so that's setting this up to be a little bit different, right? So someone who has that experience or expertise to share with us, and wisdom, I love wisdom, that's also grand, and with their mentee. So that's a definition you can take with you. Slightly different one here from the health professions literature, where mentorship is viewed as a professional working alliance. So that phrase is, especially for those of you who work in health professions, you recognize that language, alliance in which individuals work together over time, again, so that same commonality, longitudinal, in this case to support personal and professional growth, development, success of the relational partners through the provision of career and even psychosocial support, which is interesting because I know that came up in some of the words we heard early on just around the table. So yes, career, but something else, that psychosocial support. Do you think these are good definitions? Do they resonate with anything you think is missing from a mentorship definition?
The second definition implies collective. It doesn't imply a one-on-one.
Yeah, reciprocal, right? Yeah.
Or multiple.
Not just
Kind of
giving
like
my
what
wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, because a healthy mentoring relationship isn't one way. A mentor, this isn't just about altruism, this is about they're getting something as much as they're.
Mutual growth.
Yeah. And true relationship and not transactional. So yes, the very, very important points. So the goals, and again, these might seem obvious, but I wanted to make sure, it's derived from the literature. So the learning piece of it, the career guidance, and the professional growth. But these are important because they're a little different from the other models we'll talk about. So within mentoring as an approach, what are the different types, if you will, a typology of mentoring, how to deliver it? The most traditional, I'm going all the way back to the original mentor, that was his name, right? Mentor, in a one-on-one, a dyad format. Groups or mentoring circles, that's a term that's sometimes still used. Peer-to-peer mentoring. Speed mentoring, I think that kind of came after the speed dating, right? This idea that, I don't know how that passes the longitudinal test though. I see it listed as a type of mentoring, but and it is, but I wonder if you can really claim that that's true mentoring because you don't have time to develop that relationship that we just described, that just illustrated so beautifully, and you would lose the longitudinal piece. But multiple mentoring is a variation on the group mentoring, and those are traditionally longitudinal groups, so they meet over time. And this idea that you leverage the wisdom within the group, but over time. And then reverse mentoring could actually be delivered as a dyad or in a group, but it's this idea that you may have someone who's chronologically less the younger person who happens to have particular expertise is mentoring someone who may chronologically seem like they have more experience and wisdom, but around a particular topic area they don't. So this idea that you've intentionally reversed it so that you don't have the full professor as in this case, but again, that tends to be around a very specific need. The one that you see in the literature a lot of times, which seems kind of, it's technology, which I'm sure there are other examples. That's the one I think where we, just jokingly say like, oh, turn to the early career person, they probably know more about technology, which isn't always true. So I wish we had better examples than that, but that's the one that's often cited. Okay, sponsorship in comparison. So another definition, recent paper, a really good one. So a set of actions wherein an influential champion the sponsor, uses their position to actively support that colleague's career by helping them gain visibility, recognition, or positions. And that doesn't necessarily mean just position like a job. It could be on a national committee or a leadership opportunity. So this is a variant of mentoring. That's usually how it's positioned. There was some early work that came out of the organizational psychology literature, business literature, and then it moved into the academic medicine and health professions literature. And the big concern is that we know across sectors that women and individuals from historically minoritized groups traditionally do not receive sponsorship. So they might be getting mentoring, a whole lot of mentoring, they might be getting more mentoring, but they're not getting sponsorship. And sponsorship is what sort of opens the doors, gets you the seat at the table, gets you on that committee, or to be a co-author on that international white paper, whatever the coin of the realm is. So that has been a real concern for faculty developers, for faculty affairs deans, in terms of an equity issue and a support issue. So being conscious that yes, you can have a robust mentoring program, but if this piece of it is missing, or if certain individuals have access to the sponsorship outside of the mentoring, we're still not going to reach the goals that we have set. So again, that goal for sponsorship being career advancement. And now to differentiate yet again, we'll talk about coaching. So a definition from the International Coaching Foundation, which is the organization that credentials coaches. There is an organization. They have different pathways for that. And so their definition, as you see on the slide, is partnering, clients, thought-provoking creative process. It's a very different language. And inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So a word that is not here is longitudinal or ongoing. Call that out. The goals of coaching are performance improvement, so that could be for a very specific, maybe someone in a new leadership role, and might be encouraged or choose to undertake coaching specific to their leadership role. It may be around a big decision that's happening. It may be around skill improvement. I think that's where we traditionally tend to think about coaching, because that language comes out of sports, right? That's where we think about coaching. But in a workplace environment, I think traditionally we think about improving your skill or performance, but it is also expanded now to even be really for that exploration, that third goal. Any thoughts on these definitions so far? At first blush, it's like, oh, semantics, right? But then as you start to parse out the different time frames and goals, the differences become more clear.
Katie, what's the second one?
The skill improvement.
No,
Oh, sorry.
Sponsoring.
Sponsoring. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
To me, that seems like that, if somebody is an effective sponsor, there should be behaviors that are observable that sponsor is doing. Whereas with mentoring and perhaps coaching, it's much less objective.
And the interesting part is we have training for mentoring and best practices for mentoring, and we have training for coaching, and we have credentialing for coaches. And very little has been written about the sponsorship, and yet that's the one that's in the shadows, right? That's the one that can be so powerful for the career advancement piece. If I'm trying to decide, should I make a career move or not, I probably don't need you might need a sponsor if you're looking to get entree into a position, but just in terms of, your decision making, the coach is probably where you would go for that. We'll talk about that, but you're right. But it is striking that we don't know much about the sponsorship, and yet that's the one that can be very important for the career advancement and can disadvantage people in the absence of.
And sponsorship out of three would be the most visible to everybody, because there's got to be a third person involved, right? Always.
The fruits of sponsorship, but I think often
If they're encouraging a person to be on a board, making introductions, it's more overt.
it could be more visible. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Sometimes it happens behind closed doors though.
Exactly.
It's those
That's
conversations
every
that
issue
happen.
comes in. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So how do you think about incorporating elements of that, and is that becoming part of the training for mentors? So when you outline the expectations for mentoring, you'll have, here's your contract, here's your mentor agreement form, and you'll have 3 meetings a year, and you'll talk about these issues, and you'll sign off on this. And should part of that be, you'll talk about barriers to participation, or as you review your CV, your expectations for promotion, if there are things where you're having a hard time getting a foothold, that will be something that you should discuss and talk about. If your mentor doesn't know who to call, like where they should turn, like how do you turn that into something constructive, and part of that, how do you bake that into the process? And there isn't anything in the literature on that right now, so that's an invitation to you if you're interested in that, or if you have ideas to think about within your own settings, how do you do that in a way that is more equitable? So. Well, similarities have been well described, so we know that they rely on the coach mentor's listening skills, whether whichever role you're in, you are going to be more effective if you're a good listener and are skilled at asking questions and providing constructive feedback. We would hope that all of these relationships require confidentiality and setting expectations. One of the things we do early on with our mentor program within the Teaching Academy is we do have we don't call it a contract, it's a mentor agreement form, and confidentiality is certainly part of that, but also the expectation setting, because I think we've all had colleagues who from time to time say, I was assigned a mentor, but they weren't very effective, and then you ask them, like, well, what were you? And it turns out they really were looking for someone who wasn't necessarily talking to them about what was on their CV and what was needed for promotion, and that sort of thing. They really just wanted someone to listen to them, just to kind of like vent, right? And is it clear, like, is that what the relationship's for? And if it is, that's great, then both parties know. But likewise, like who is responsible for setting up the meetings? We make that very clear in our mentor agreement form, that the mentee is responsible for setting up and how many meetings. So it's very clear, and it's not this mystery like, oh, your mentor met with you 16 times and I only saw mine once, so being very upfront about those, but certainly confidentiality. And there are similarities in terms of all of these conversations should at some point, you would hope, talk about improving performance, professional performance, and what to do. But then as we talk about the differences, it's something we've already highlighted here. So the coaching tends to focus on a more specific area or issue. So it might be, emotion regulation during, high pressure meetings, or difficult integration of teams from different sites. The relationship typically has a duration, and certainly in a formal coaching where there might be a contract involved, then it's obviously it's for fee. There's going to be some sort of a duration or number of sessions. But even if it's sort of within the institution, if there's someone who has that coaching responsibility, it tends to be like, I need some getting ready for this impending change, and could we meet a couple of times to talk about this? So not implied that you would continue to meet, for the next 5 years. And a key difference here is that in coaching, unlike mentoring, the agenda is set, I'm looking at it, this is not quite right. So the agenda is set by the coach in the sense that the coach says we have this time together, but what's not captured by that table, and I apologize, is that then the mentee would say, or the coachee would say, these are the things I want to talk about today. So they really mutually, they agree on that together. But it's definitely a more structured relationship in contrast with mentoring, which again is focusing on your career or your development. It's an ongoing, it tends to be less formal. And they're very specifically, usually the mentee says, these are the things I need to talk about today, or, I'm supposed to have these things done before my pre-promotion review, and can we talk about, I'm stuck on this, or it might be about the research, so can we talk about that? So it's a little misleading to say the agenda is set by the coach for the coaching category. I apologize. It would be mutual, but it's just, again, it's a more structured relationship. And usually the coach, part of their goal would be to say, like, okay, there are these 5 things, like now I need you to narrow down what's the 1 or 2 things we'll talk about in our session today. So it's that kind of prescribing the boundaries. I love this statement because I think it encapsulates, and if you have to explain this to someone in one sentence, this idea that the coach talks to you, the mentor talks with you, and the sponsor talks about you. So if you take nothing away from what I've said so far today, and knowing that the roles may overlap. So there's a great paper that just came out, I apologize, I'm not sure if I have the reference at the end of the talk, but the team interviewed family medicine, chairs of departments of family medicine, and parsed out which roles like they were undertaking as they met with faculty, and they can do sort of all three in the course of, and you can too, and probably are already doing it, but the research team was really trying to get a sense for like the percentage of time they spend on any given one, and the paper is much more complex than I'm making it out to be, but really interesting to think about the different types of work that you might do all in a day, but then also the faculty, the chairs becoming more conscious about, and then, saying, like, now I feel more deficient in my coaching skills, but I feel pretty good about my mentoring skills, so that learning aspect to it too. So another way to compare the three from a slightly different, a different paper, again, looking at the time frame, so again, this episodic versus periodic versus longitudinal, what are the key goals, the career advancement versus more of a short-term skill or performance, and then mentoring tending to be that career guidance, so advancement versus guidance, and then the method, which could be sponsoring, making that very specific advocacy, trying to get your name out there, versus the coaching being focusing on one piece of it, and the mentoring being broad-based dialogue. All right, so let's return first to the case of Dr. DeLeon. So this is our associate professor, all of 3 years, getting ready for the next level. So you can turn to the same neighbor or a different neighbor, depending on who's in the room, and let's put together a plan for them. So, turn to your neighbor. What do you think this faculty colleague needs?
Different senior colleagues. Yeah, like someone that brings an
The chair
And then he,
could also be the
or maybe like someone.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
or use
The senior.
Oh, yeah.
I know, but I'm not.
That's happening right now.
Aware of the expectations or the
Is that,
He was
but I also advocating it is
Find someone who can admire and be like,
break time is going to say it's going to include society.
Yeah, I think the question I would have is, when you want to do why? Make these things come together.
yeah.
That's also what I
well, that's true.
He's also, I mean, that doesn't help her to be
Yeah, so is
It's possible that not everyone is going to offer that, but I think
Right.
they But also, I think, and I think.
Yes.
I think go talk to them. More comprehensive, laying that out.
Even though the ranking
Put it in that, it's like then come back and talk. And gaps in there, whether it's short term or long term.
And they
Wow.
being a mentor.
That's where it's navigate. Right.
I should keep going. That is the rod
First step, find somebody.
It's supposed to be, I love that. Friday, whether you
And I think that's what. Dialogue with it.
And I would say that's kind of typical.
A little bit, and that's where also,
Yeah, maybe a good clinician actually wanted to.
but that's also where I think, like if we get emotionally, where it's like, look, there is a little bit of a prescriptive process to this, and maybe you don't know, you don't know.
Legitimate.
Oh, I bet.
I'm not aware of schools that are required to apply for full time. You know that?
We were, I was in
Or is it required to apply for full
The coach.
Well,
Yeah, it's the
culture's changing.
that requires
I mean, to progress. Yes, I mean, there have been a number of individuals sitting in the ranks, and the instruction has come to the chair, they need to get these people.
Yes, she is
So, I mean, I don't, no, we've pushed comes to shove, if someone said, absolutely, no, I'm not putting my dossier
Even
together,
though it's
but.
less expensive to,
Versus
like,
I
but they don't, they maybe just.
Now, depending, I mean, that varies by faculty appointment, and, but, there's definitely a renewed interest in making sure people are moving through the ranks in a timely way, yes.
So that's
moments, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Many
Yeah, no
moments.
doubt about it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna call you back, because I wanna make sure we have time to talk about both cases, so, anyone ready to share their plan for our colleague, Dr. DeLeon?
We suggested that he find someone at the meeting with similar research and get themselves on a collaborative project and ride their coattails to a national reputation.
Okay, so good prescription to do the work on their own. Is there anyone who could support this faculty member? Where would you direct them for some support?
So we were kind of hoping that the national meeting has some well, I don't know, subcommittees, committees where people with like-minded intentions can go and get help.
So maybe some informal mentoring from national peers, or maybe the Specialty Society has a mentoring program, sometimes that happens. But then also building the national reputation by being there and getting part of those, doing the work. Yeah, thanks, great.
We talked a little bit about the need for sponsorship from the chair that he's going to be able to carve out time. Because, you can develop all the skill that you want, which is also necessary. But if your clinic doesn't slow down or you don't get any sort of respite there, those skills are sometimes for naught.
Gail brought up a really good point about finding an author of a journal article that is in the research area that you're of interest and just reaching out to that individual. That could be a good source of networking and
Absolutely.
and we were talking about how oftentimes those authors are like, oh my gosh, you read my paper.
Right? Yeah, ego is alive and well.
Because right,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's a very specific solution, absolutely. Yeah, great advice. Other suggestions in this case study?
Rich thought we should fire the senior colleague.
Oh,
It's so bad.
Is that good mentoring? Is it, that's
That's a good mentoring.
It's reality.
Yeah, you'll be
fine. Well, how would you improve on it then? Let's hear the plan from this end of the table. What would you offer?
That could be coaching.
Right.
The senior colleague, I mean, we read that last sentence and it's kind of, there's a negative vibe to it. But it also could be, it could also be coaching in reality, saying you're gonna be fine. You're gonna do what you love. And if you love seeing patients and having students and the students sniff that out pretty quickly and you're gonna get good evals, you'll be fine.
But helping the person discern what it is they want to
That they
do
want
is
to do.
important, and that would be a part of coaching as well. So do you really, attending society meetings every year, is that moving you forward? It's kind of purposeless. Is that a word, purposeless?
So I think you're absolutely right, and this is what's great about coming to a Creighton audience, because I can use the word discernment here and you all get it. So in a way that if I use it at the least unchurched place in America in Vermont, and it doesn't matter what faith, it's the least unchurched, discernment doesn't mean it what it does at a Jesuit place. So yes, so coaching is a lot, and the questions that when you go through coach training, you're trained to ask a lot of those open-ended questions, absolutely, to bring out from the coachee what it is that they really want to focus on and where they want to go next and what their plan and their next steps are. So absolutely. I do think around the mentoring, especially if, we don't know if this senior colleague is just the person down the hall or if it's an assigned mentor. We don't have that level of information. But if it really is supposed to be someone who's a mentor to junior faculty, to earlier career faculty, we would hope that they were better versed in the promotion guidelines for one, right? So that they were, I think that's part of the mentor training. If it's around promotion, then they should know the promotion guidelines, they should have examples, they should know how to read through the dossier and the CV and give constructive feedback and suggestions. If it's this issue about not having time and really not having time, the advocacy part might be part of it. So who's talking, who's helping this person develop their conversation to have with their division chief or their chair or whoever's scheduling them for clinic. There's that piece of it. Maybe they need some coaching on how to have that conversation. So I think this is where you get into the nuances of what would be beneficial, but I think we all get these scenarios where the faculty member comes and says, I'm at wit's end, nobody's mentoring me. And so, but it may be several things that they need, and it might fall under these three different categories. So I think having greater precision about what is it that you need to be successful, or what's missing here, let's help you figure out. Yeah.
Sorry, clarity.
Yeah. All right, any other thoughts on this case? Any aha moments? All right, so now.
Can I offer something?
Oh, yeah. Yes, welcome.
Hi, so this is Maureen Tierney. One of the things, and Dr. Hansen actually, I think spearheaded this, was to see if you could get permission to actually have a mentor offsite in this sort of subspecialty. So ask your chair, would they be willing to allow you to have a mentor relationship with an expert in your research field? And potentially even get some financial support for that.
Interesting possibility. I think many people do that on their own accord or informally, but to have a formal mechanism for that's very interesting. Now, it is true if you're in a very specialized field that oftentimes the mentoring you have for your career progression, maybe not necessarily your progression at your institution, but for your broader, your research or your, that piece of your career, you definitely may need to talk to people outside of your institution because you might be the only person who studies that phenomenon or that subspecialty area. So, so that I can appreciate, but that's interesting to have a formal mechanism to do that. Well, thanks for sharing that. All right, so we have time to talk about the case of Dr. Lee. So you can stay in your same group or turn to a different person. So this is a more experienced person who already has significant leadership experience. So take a minute, turn to your neighbor, a couple of minutes, and put together a plan for Dr. Lee.
Essentially like
Yeah.
variation of your. Come on over.
I guess we're based on.
This is most.
You didn't have to leave.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I did.
Information of disease signalation.
Yeah.
Opening for a
Yeah.
Somebody, yeah, the trusted colleague, coach would be helpful.
That's why
Would have experience navigating.
I have to say you're like med students, you're already like really reading into it, I love it, so.
It's just such a.
So that trusted colleague.
Right.
I got to see everything. You can take it at face value that this really isn't trusted and trustworthy.
Yeah.
I wrote the case, you can take it at face value.
Of a sponsor, capital
Promotion, everybody.
This is, she should have, either way, she should have a job. She should have plans to stay or not.
I like to just get, you think there's a.
So, when I was in graduate school, we had a faculty member that, my lab was right next to the department chair.
And with who? And, but that's the question.
Where basically everybody going to and pretty much clockwork every year, the certain faculty member would come down and get out of conversation. So we find out about wanting a raise because he had these and this, job offer from a he just did whatever was right. And department chair, but he come out.
Oh, yeah.
Really, again.
Highlighted in that situation.
He ended up being a department chair in the University of Maryland, and I called me in the lines that I remember my NAMI director just passed away. So he turned around and was totally out of the blue. I didn't talk to him in the end.
That's a good first step. Whether that really fits in helpful.
But it was, that was definitely something that I kept working on.
Yeah, you gotta figure out that.
You gotta do that. If you really want to advance your right?
So, but they changed how.
That doesn't mean I like to do that.
Or even just to see what your options are.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had to be
I could stay at this place and dean, or should I go to a more prestigious place?
Yeah.
Try to go prestigious, see what happens.
If the relationship is good.
Oh my God.
Jennifer, are you really going to retire?
Oh, right. Just like
It could be a real mentoring or even sponsor school.
Oh.
Okay, I gotta bring you back, only because we're gonna be running short on time. Great ideas. Thanks again, and apologies to those on Zoom since you're having to do this on your own, but thanks for for listening and commenting in. Okay, so the case of Dr. Lee. Well, I have to say, as I was listening around the room, I definitely heard some great suggestions that I would call mentoring, because I heard some very experienced people with some great advice they would give to this faculty member chair. So I would say you were a lot of good mentor potential already around the room. But I did hear the other words used as well. So let's start at this end. If anyone on this end of the table be willing to share what you would suggest to Dr. Lee.
I would suggest she figure out what her clear goal is. You know, what if she does want to go down that path of leadership, kind of reaching out to a person who is there and asking us what questions, because it's not really like she's looking for that position of leadership. It's kind of being presented to her, kind of somebody's trying to push her.
And if she's conflicted, if she's wondering like, is this what I need? Is this what I should pursue? Should I stay or should I go, right? Who should she talk to then?
I mean, I would probably suggest a coach or even just a mentor, kind of seeing how their career has progressed to that point, and what the ups and downs were, what their advice is on how to proceed.
So probably two conversations, right? So I think you just described it so nicely. So the mentor is someone who knows the landscape, who can really talk about the pitfalls and the roadblocks and the opportunities. And then the coach who wouldn't give any advice, but would be there to listen and sort of asking those probing questions about, well, what's more important to that values clarification maybe, or timeline clarification. All right, I'll go to this corner. What's your plan for Dr. Lee? I heard a lot of plotting over here. A lot of close reading of the case. A lot of good suggestions.
Yeah, and to us, it sounded like the trusted colleague might be a true sponsor there in many ways, and I think unequivocally would encourage this person to apply if that's what they want. I agree with the clarity about what they want to do, but apply and see what those where it takes you, because just the experience, right, of applying and maybe even interviewing, that's going to really help inform in the long run. So whether it's that role or a different role, so.
You could also play a role as a sponsor, depending on the relationship and what she projects.
Right, could be really influential, and especially, I mean, if the dean is intending to retire and doesn't sort of have any, sense of loss about institutional loss, but personally not feeling rejected if the person moves on to the next, might really be in a position to want to advocate for this individual. Especially if they have connections. So, but again, the shadow side of sponsoring is that this person now has access potentially. So I would say one of the antidotes to, I would say the negative part of sponsoring, I mean, there's a lot of good about sponsoring, but the antidote, I guess, is transparent hiring processes, right? So anybody can sort of, be informed about a position or get their name, but in the end, if the hiring process itself is transparent and thorough, that's a way to make sure that all the candidates have vetting. So
there might be an internal candidate.
Well, that's a whole level of complexity. All right, so that's a case for a different day, different workshop. So, other ideas on how you would counsel, wise counsel for Dr. Lee? Yeah, go ahead.
So we talked a lot about imposter phenomenon and just that component in having whether it be a coach or a mentor that addresses that with Dr. Lee, because not only as a female, but a female who is more than likely an achiever, she probably suffers from or endures some of those feelings of being an imposter. And so really just getting to the bottom kind of goes back to that BHAG goal, that big, hairy, audacious goal. What do you want? What's gonna fill your bucket at the end of the day? And you can do it. So both that coach, that sponsor, that mentorship, she needs all three.
Okay.
She just needs all three.
There you go. Needs all three. Yeah. And that's probably a good note to end on. I appreciate everyone taking the time and taking the cases so seriously. So as you just in closing think about selecting a model, so certainly taking a look at what's already available. If you have elements of the three, if you have people who could be in those roles, doing a needs assessment. And then going back to what are the primary goals? So, and not, trying to develop one program that's going to meet all of the goals. I mean, without careful planning, that's not likely to be successful. Certainly turning to the literature and then recognizing that there are resources and they're not fantastically expensive to receive training. So using train the trainer models like the SIMMER program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison or the new IAM-REACH program at IAMC. So looking to those, and many professional organizations provide mentoring or mentor training programs. So looking to those resources. So I think we hit all of these. We've talked about these approaches and the goals and thinking about how to recommend models based on the needs. So I will end here. I know some of you need to dash, but I'll be here for questions afterwards. Thank you again. It's been a lot of fun to be here and to have this conversation. So thanks, and thank you for hosting. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kate.